Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PHLY Draft Show with Fran Duffy from Radio Row in Nolens. Bo Wolf and the man himself, Fran Duffy, who is fresh off the road at the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl, and back on the road here at the Super Bowl. Fran, how are your travels?
Doing great. It was a fun week. You know, I went to Shrine Bowl 2 Thursdays ago now.
Yeah, impossible to tell.
Yeah,
not even worth trying to think about.
Who could know? But you know, going back, it was went down to Shrine Bowl for a few days. Went right from there to Mobile. It was both were great trips. Both staffs did an outstanding job of putting on a great event. You get so much value from both and different things in different ways. So no, it were 2 great trips and getting ready for the next one because the combine's just a couple weeks away.
Whew. We'll have that covered as well.
Yes.
Now, you have covered the Senior Bowl so well on allphly.com. Good time to become a diehard. Actually, a great time to become a diehard because this week you've got a deal for $36 for the entire year to get access to not only Fran's written coverage of events like the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl and the Combine to come, but also his living, breathing database with scouting reports on over 160 players so far. We know that that's going to grow.
Yes.
You are a true sicko. If you want access to that sicko-dom, now is the time to do it to become a diehard. But because you have written about your all-star game from the Senior Bowl roster and you've had daily reports, we're not going to go too deep into the Senior Bowl and every player that you watch, but we do want to pick out a few things here. Let's start with, give me 2 players who you had not yet watched.
Okay.
You got sort of fresh eyes on at the Senior Bowl who made you want to be like, ooh, I can't wait to go watch these guys because they showed me a little something.
Yeah, we'll start on the defense. Well, actually, both guys will come from the defensive side. McWilliams, the corner from UCF, would be the first player that comes to mind. He was a guy that made my all-practice team after the week of practice in Mobile. Was really good in one-on-ones. He's a big, long corner. Looks the part for a guy that's going to line up on the outside and win. And you know, when you see those one-on-ones, to me, like that, watching corners in those situations, because this is a matchup that is heavily tilted towards the receiver being able to win. If those guys can stand out in those situations at corner, that really carries a lot of weight with me. And I thought McWilliams looked really strong throughout the course of the week. And what really stood out most to me was for a bigger and longer corner, Bo, he had that ability to get in and out of cuts and read routes, read route stems, you know, make sure that he was in that hip pocket of the receiver on those intermediate routes, those deep curl routes, those comeback routes. A number of times over the week, I thought McWilliams really showed up well in those types of drills.
So I'm not putting this comparison on him.
Okay.
But as you're talking about that does remind me of a decade ago, Richard Sherman at the Senior Bowl, a guy who was unheralded coming in, bigger player, and you're actually seeing him sort of run with big guys, and you're thinking to yourself, well, this could be interesting. I don't know if he's that type of player, that physical, but that's sort of a similar story.
Sure, and that's the thing is you see, especially look, and UCF is not a group of 5 school anymore. They are officially in the Big 12, but still it's a program that's on the rise, right? And that doesn't have like all the star-studded talent that some others do. But being able to see McWilliams come to that stage and show out the way that he did, I thought was very, very impressive and a big week for him, certainly.
And that is a position where the practices really do matter,
yes.
right? You're seeing them react in a way that translates to the game. What will you be most interested to see from him when you do watch him?
I just want to see if that stuff carries through. You know, one thing I talked about, like that ability to stay in a receiver's hip pocket on those intermediate routes. And the reason why, like, I love seeing that in the one-on-ones is that you don't always get to see it on film, and if you do, it's a small sample, right? It's just seeing how they match up when they're one-on-one against a dig, against a comeback, against a deep curl. Do you have that ability to basically match that receiver's route? And you say, like, as soon as that receiver drops his pads to go into the route break, does that corner also show that ability to be able to do that? I think that when you look at McWilliams, he did that in practice. Can that carry over when I do that further film study from him at UCF?
And so, like, valuation-wise, we're thinking like a ceiling of the 3rd round.
He looked like a day 2 type corner. Watching him live. Okay. That's what he looked like. And there are players that you see them live in that small sample, and you're like, oh, he looks like he's that. Does that carry over to the film? Sometimes, look, there are guys that do go to these events and inflate their stock, and they help themselves in such a way that they get drafted higher based solely off what they did in Mobile. We'll see if McWilliams is one of those guys.
All right, who's number 2?
The other one is a guy that I didn't put on my all-practice team.
Okay.
But he was just a pain in the ass for everyone to block all week. And
Love
that's
that.
Utah defensive tackle Junior Tafuna. And I think when you look at him, His bull rush was one of the harder moves to stop, and I was going to put that as like a side note at the end. Like I did after the Shrine Bowl in that recap, I did like the awards, like the superlatives, tough, the toughest rush move to block. If I did that for the Senior Bowl, Tafuna would have gotten it.
Okay.
His bull rush all week just gave people fits. He's not the biggest. He's not the most explosive. He's not the twitchiest. But just like it was just a pain to block all week long, and he did it against a number of guys because they were shuffling offensive linemen up and down the line of scrimmage. So we got to see him go against centers and guards and tackles that were sliding inside, and everybody for the most part just had problems blocking that guy. I'm excited to dive more into Tafuna's film.
What kind of body type are we talking about?
I would say like not as squatty as a like Timmy Jernigan, like not as sawed off, right? But of that body type, of that ilk, he's going to look a little Braden Fiskish.
Okay.
Or he's like, he's not the longest. He's like 6'2". I've got the official measurements here. I probably could look that up to answer
like a
that
lighter
question.
Elijah Qualls.
Well, Qualls was like super short. And the arms were
arms were very short.
Were extremely short. He wasn't quite to that level. Here, I got it right here. So, Junior Tafuna, he came in at 6'0", 303. 32.78 arms. So under 33-inch arms is a below average number. 6'0", so just under 6'3". Below average number. 303 pounds, average number. So a pretty average body frame across the board.
Early day 3.
Probably. I think looking at it, I think that's kind of what you're looking at with a guy with that skill set. Probably not a guy that you're going to say is going to work his way up. He was a player that I actually heard from a Utah offensive lineman in this last year. Hey, this is a guy to watch here moving forward.
Nice flex.
And he had a strong year. Ended up earning an invite to the Senior Bowl.
That's the fun thing about this, and we will get to that later in the show. Some of the work that you do at these events, not just on the players themselves, but mining them for information about players in next year's draft class and the year after that draft class, and players in the league now. So very interesting.
Because talking to these guys about themselves is so pointless. They're already, by the time it used to be like that coaching didn't start until like pre-combine. So like right now, those players would be going through that work with agents and with their trainers, and they have specifically, they meet with former scouts and GMs during this time of the process and then get coached up on how to answer these questions correctly. But that has now even started earlier for all of these guys. So I don't even bother asking, the questions about them.
Sure.
I want to ask them, all right, like who are the toughest players you faced in practice every day, and like the toughest guys you saw in games, and tell me about some of your teammates. So we'll get to that later. But I do hear a lot of these guys. They've been on my radar for a couple of years now for that reason.
Okay, let's switch it now to guys who you had watched.
Yep.
You had certain expectations for in this game, and they overperformed your expectations. They were pleasant surprises.
Yeah, no question. Number one for me on that list is Oladejo, the pass rusher from UCLA. Now, this is a guy that started the last 2.5 years at Mike linebacker, started this season at Mike linebacker for UCLA. He was the middle linebacker, and then they shifted some things around in the front. They kicked Oladejo down to defensive end. They bought a linebacker off the bench who ended up becoming an All-American this past year. So there was like a former walk-on who was a backup for 2 years, and everyone saw he's tearing up the scout team. He's unbelievable. But the coaches didn't start because he was a walk-on. It wasn't a scholarship kid.
Okay.
They put him in the starting lineup, and he had 12 tackles a game and was an All-American and declared for the draft. And he might be the first linebacker off the board. Crazy.
That's crazy.
I talked with a bunch
honestly, it sounds like a movie where it's like, Joe Osman went back to school as a 35-year-old, and nobody knows that he's actually old, and then he's able to, work his way up into the top of the draft.
This is Carson Sweshinger, by the way, is his name. We call him by his name. And again, junior in this class. Right now, my favorite linebacker that I've studied so far. A good player. He's a good athlete. He's fluid in space. He's not like some Tommy Tryhard guy. He played every special teams unit the last 2 years as a backup. But I have so many quotes from players over these 2 trips where they were we saw him just tearing apart our starting offense every single week.
The players know, man.
And they were like,
players know.
I asked them, I was like, so why do you think he wasn't out there? Was it just because he was there? And they were like, well, probably had something to do with it, but you'd have to ask the coaches. They were pretty diplomatic about it, but they were all we knew that he was going to be crazy, and he ended up being outstanding. So either way.
So Oladejo.
Yeah, so they to get Sweshinger on the field, they kicked Oladejo down to defensive end. And watching it early, I was like, okay, I kind of see it, but he's a little bit out of place. He's probably more of a Sam linebacker. And then as I watched a game late in the season, And you saw like a couple flashes here and there where I'd say, okay, like he's got really fast hands at the top of the rush. He's still kind of figuring it out, but you know, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm like buying what the upside is here. And there was, I heard Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Senior Bowl, talk about how like scouts really pushed for it. Scouts wanted to see Oladejo at the Senior Bowl, and Jim will always say that they serve NFL teams, they serve scouts, and so if scouts are saying we really want to see this player in Mobile, then they will push for it. Oladejo got invited. Dude, he was awesome. Like from day one, this is a guy that like you could tell like had been working on his pass rush stuff like from since the season ended.
Okay.
I don't want to say he was unblockable. He wasn't perfect throughout the week. But number one, he bought a ton of juice. He came off the ball on one high side. He went and did bull rush stuff. He was able to win inside, won in a variety of ways. And like that, like middle linebacker, like intensity, like that energy. He brought that to like the defensive line, like one-on-ones. He ended up winning like the Good Guy Award during the week of practice. From what I understand, like got votes as like the defensive lineman of the week from opposing offensively. He didn't win it from that group. It was a really good defensive line group on both sides. But Oladejo, like to me, I thought coming in, 6th or 7th round pick. Well, I'm not really like. I came out like he looks like a day 2 guy like all day. Like I absolutely am very high. If he goes to the combine and tears it up, like. It could be like top 50, top 60.
It's a scary one, right? Because it's either going to make you look great,
right,
or it's going to make you look like a fool.
Yes,
and it could make you look like a fool for passing on him, right? But it's also got to be hard to buy it if you haven't seen it enough. But the importance of that position, probably a swing worth taking. It must be a very difficult and interesting conversation in your draft prep rooms.
Yeah, I think that the character portion of it is something where it's like, all right, I feel really good about this kid off the field. And if he tests really well, you get into that like high floor, high upside thing where it's like, all right, like even if he doesn't hit his upside, I feel like, okay, we've got a 3rd or 4th defensive end that can play special teams, that can do everything we want. He's going to be everything off the field. And if he hits, he's going to hit big. And that's a bet that a lot of teams will feel comfortable taking once you get into the 3rd round.
Honestly, it not necessarily the same type of player, but it does remind me of the Eagles' 3rd round pick last year who did a similar thing at the Senior Bowl, Jalix Hunt. And you're like, in the 2nd round, this swing is probably not worth it, just the opportunity cost. There are other players who will be better bets at that position. But the further you go, late 3rd round, if this guy can become a number 2 defensive end, boy, is that worth it versus what your other options are in that range.
And Jalix was like a more it was a longer shot because of like how much of a project he was.
Sure.
But I don't think that Oladejo quite has Jalix's ceiling because Jalix is like rare, unique gifts, whereas Oladejo, like even as a defensive end, a converted linebacker, like we're not talking like the Micah Parsons transition. He's not that level of freak athlete, but a guy that he's got some juice off the edge, and I was impressed. I thought he was awesome. To me, like a shoe-in for the all-practice team. I was shocked that he didn't get defensive lineman of the week.
All right, the number 2 guy who exceeded your expectations.
Yeah, exceeded expectations. I think overall, I went back and forth on this, man. I was going back and forth on who I ended up going with, and even still, I'm going to go. Let's go with Dante Trader. We'll go with the safety from Maryland. And to me, I think when you're looking at safety, you want to see cover skills. And what value can this guy bring, on passing downs? What role can he bring? And I thought that he showed up really well in those one-on-one periods. I think when you look at Trader, the big thing with him is that he was like the number 1 or top 3 lacrosse recruit coming out of high school as well.
Oh, man, we got Chris over here who loves Maryland, loves lacrosse. He's going to be frothing at the mouth.
I mean, I'm surprised he hasn't made his way over here yet. But, Dante Trader played both sports at Maryland when he first got there, and then a couple years ago said, like, all right, I'm going to put lacrosse to the side. Let's focus solely on football, and has gotten better each year. Studying him this fall, I thought, okay, like, he looks solid, probably more like an early day 3 type. I think based off traits, there's something there. But seeing him go through one-on-ones, and look, team safety's a tough one when you go to these games, especially in team periods, playing downhill. You don't get to see all the run defense stuff. But based off what I saw from a pass game standpoint, he looked like he could be a day 2 pick. He at that size, the way he moved, the way he matched up in coverage, I like what I saw from Dante Trader.
What type of player? Any stylistic comparison that comes to mind?
Let me see if I've got one written down on him. When seeing him live, I didn't have one. Yeah, I didn't write one down. He did come in a little bit smaller than I thought. Based off film, he was listed. He was listed 6 foot at Maryland. He came in at just under 5'11", just under 200 pounds.
Like your boy Juan Thornhill, potentially.
Potentially.
Not quite the explosive athlete.
Yeah, and it's funny because I thought of Juan Thornhill when I was studying the other safety, safety from Virginia, Jonas Sanker.
Okay.
He was my guy coming in. I was like,
I remember you talked about him.
Yeah, Sanker is a guy. I thought he was okay. He didn't pop quite as much as I was hoping coming into the week. And to me, like Trader was a guy I was like, man, the way he looked in one-on-ones was impressive.
All right, now let's go to the other side of that.
Yep.
And guys who you were a little bit underwhelmed by, who you had higher expectations for, didn't see what you were hoping to see.
I would say, and this is not even necessarily just for me, this is, I would say, for like pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
There was a lot of love out there for West Virginia offensive lineman Wyatt Milum. He could be a sleeper first-round guy, certainly a top 50 guy.
Zach Frazier type?
Yeah. He's like because he played left tackle, and everyone thinks he's going to be guard. But man, he had a rough week. It started really, really bad, and it got progressively better. Day 3 was a little bit better, but it was a rough go. And so he would be one where I'm like any thought that people had about him going first round is probably out the door. I just watching, because it was almost like every rep one-on-one he was getting beat back, and then even in the run game stuff in team drills, I thought that he was really struggling. And again, he was playing mostly guard. He had been a tackle at West Virginia, but Milum was the guy I thought really struggled.
Yeah, I mean, this is it's tough, right? You need to do your work as a scout to contextualize this stuff because, guys will tell you, you never know what somebody's going through. Maybe there's something else that's
of course.
That's the reason that their mind is occupied elsewhere, right? They're not fully prepped. But it's also hard to not have that in your mind when you're thinking about when I was there and I saw this guy play, like he wasn't bringing it. And so those are difficult conversations.
It's especially interesting when you get players that play the same position. Mm-hmm. And you get into it, and you're like, all right, I just watched apples for apples. These two guys go up against each other, not up against each other, but go through one-on-one reps against some of the best in the country. And one guy looked great, and the other looked terrible. How could we possibly have the guy that looked terrible in the same environment ahead of this guy?
And you're thinking, like, if we're going to play in a big game, these guys need to be, like, this is what their big deal is. And so one guy was ready and one guy wasn't. It's hard to not weight that. Right. In the draft process.
No question. And so I think that's and to me that's one of the interesting parts about going to these games is just being able to put those guys in an apples-to-apples scale. And honestly, it's what I also get out of the combine. And Bo, like when we go to the combine every year, I love to go. I sit in the same spot in the lower bowl in the stadium. I've done it for years now. I sit over by the broad jump, and it's right where they do the field work for the drills. And I just watch those guys go through and do the same drills over and over. And I don't even necessarily care about like the athletic testing. I'll get the testing numbers later. I love watching them go through the same drills in their tights and in their underwear, right? So you see everything that these guys have at their disposal, right? And it's like
it's freaky, friend.
I know, but you see like one after the next, after the next, after the next, go through the same drill, and it's like okay, like athletically. Comparing these guys, it's very easy when you get to see it. You could see guys that start to differentiate.
There's a wide middle, right?
Yes.
And then there are guys who pop like they move different, and then there are guys who pop like they don't quite move that level.
To your point, that is like when I have I don't even think you've seen this. I have a binder that I print out, and I'm going to be printing it out for.
I can't believe there are depths to your sickness that I've not yet.
So I have a binder that I print out, and it's for taking notes at the combine. I perfected it over the years. Perfected is a strong word, but I've honed it in over the years.
It's also next to your bedside table in case you wake up in the middle of the night with memories of these workouts.
Yes, and so it's a working template that I have, and basically it's like okay, like it's every single drill for every position, and it's rapid because these guys go fast.
Sure.
So it's like all right, like Bob Smith, tackle one. All right, they're doing the weave drill, bang, and it's one of 3 grades. It's either like a plus, a minus, or a dash. To your point, so it's like guys are either going to look great. They don't look as good, or like, okay, that was like an average rep, and I just fly through. And then at the end, in between position groups, I go through, and I'm like, all right, who got the most pluses, who got the most minuses?
I kind of love that.
And it was just kind of, it's an easy way for me to say, like, I've got 15 minutes, who did well, who didn't do well, and being able to just kind of compare apples to apples is very helpful.
No, that's very good. All right, who is the second player who underwhelmed you?
All right, my next one will be Landon Jackson, the defensive end from Arkansas, who got another one where he got better as the week went on. It was also this was very interesting this year. I felt that this was more prevalent this year than any other. Where as you go through one-on-ones, some guys took a ton of reps. Like Oladejo took a ton of reps. The tackle from North Dakota State, Gray Zabel, took a ton of reps. Yeah, he was awesome. Probably the best player there.
Puff your chest out,
overall performance. I know. Killing myself.
Man, I know. You wanted him in your mock draft. You're gonna regret that all draft season long.
I know. But there were some guys where it was like they took 3 reps a day.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes that's by design. Maybe a guy got dinged up. Maybe he's taking coaching. I'm not watching like everything along the sidelines. I'm trying to watch what's going on the field. But like Donovan Azaraku, the pass rusher from BC, from Boston College, he was one of those guys too. And as I'm going through my notes, I'm like, man, he only took 6 reps the last 2 days, but he won 5 of them. And he won 5 of them like clean.
Right.
And then, but I look back at Landon Jackson, the defensive end from Arkansas, who was a 4th-year player. I kind of thought it was like a sneaky fit for the Eagles as a defensive end who could kick inside on pass downs. He's a little bit of a longer body type, kind of similar to Josh Sweat body type, but I think he does more. He looks more natural playing inside, whereas Sweat, whenever they've kicked him snug inside, he doesn't do as well. Landon Jackson just looked okay the first couple of days, and I was hoping to see a little bit more from a guy that I thought had a chance at round 1. Now, day 3 he came out and he had like 3 really good wins. So it's like, all right, but he was able to turn things around, but I was hoping to see a little bit more from him over the course of the week.
All right, you mentioned the Eagles. We should take a little segment here to discuss what the Eagles' interests will be in the draft as we are here in the Super Bowl. Feels a little bit silly to already be looking ahead, but that's what we're here for.
That's why we're here.
To me, the Eagles enter this offseason with their number 1 priority roster-wise, and tell me if you disagree, being the edge.
Yeah. Because
Josh Sweat is scheduled to be a free agent.
Yep.
We don't know what Brandon Graham's future is, and even if he returns, you certainly can't count on a high level of production. And so you've got Nolan Smith, who has been an absolute home run in year 2.
Yep.
And that lets you feel better about it. But after that, you've got Bryce Huff, who, unless the Eagles trade him, will be on the roster and will be penciled into a part of the rotation, but certainly can't count on him to be a starting caliber player. You got Jalen Hunt, who maybe you hope that he makes a leap in year 2, but just knowing the way that Howie Roseman wants to build this roster, I would imagine that short term, that's their top priority, and then we can get to what I would say long term is a bigger priority.
Yeah, to me, I don't think you can go into 2025 thinking that Jalen Hunt can be a starter and an answer for you. I think he's done some nice things, certainly off the bench, but I think you'd feel much better going in because. Look, this was going to be a redshirt year for him, right?
Yeah.
Like that was going to be the plan until Bryce Huff became a 0, BG gets hurt, and now all of a sudden you're kind of pressing him into action. And again, he has flashed, but not to the point where I'm like, oh yeah, put this kid in the starting lineup and you'll feel good about it opposite Nolan. So I do think that this is a position where they're going to probably have to address this pretty early in the draft, and someone who should be able to play right away. And so when I look at it, I think when you look at these edge rushers, I think you have to do one of 2 things. Either you're of that Landon Jackson archetype that I mentioned, where it's like, okay, like you're line up as outside linebacker, on base downs, and you can kick inside at times, or the Nolan Smith, where it's like, hey, you're going to be an outside linebacker, and you have that flexibility where you can drop and you can do all those different things from that. To me, like you can't. I don't think in an ideal world, it's a Josh Sweat type of player where you're only a 4-3 defensive end. And like that's what you do best. And look, Sweat has done some nice things dropping in coverage. That's not like his not his strong suit. So I think ideally you'd want someone that has that skill set.
To me, the other top priority, and this goes back to last year's draft. We know what they were bringing in for pre-draft visits in round 1. I think if Howie Roseman had his druthers, I think the first round pick would be Lane Johnson's replacement.
Long-term replacement. Yep.
I think that's knowing the way that they want to build that makes sense to me. I don't think that Mekhi Becton is going to be re-signed to be that guy. I don't think that Tyler Steen's going to be penciled in there. I think knowing that the way that Howie builds things, I think that's what he would want to get in the building.
Yeah, and I think when you look at this class, there are going to be some options there at the end of round 1 where it's worth taking a swing on. And there are some players that have been talked about as first-round picks. There's this tackle from Texas, Cameron Williams, that this was his first year starting for Texas. Dude, he had like 27 penalties. Since we started the podcast, I think he got flagged again. There was a ton of penalties. Very unrefined player. Had been a right tackle only. Was late to football, if memory serves. Got to it late in high school. So like there are all these things. Where like this sounds like a Jeff Stoutland type of project. I think that he was being talked like mid-season as he might be like a top 20, top 25 pick. But as the season went on, you kind of saw like, all right, this guy's not ready for that. And a lot of people thought he was going to go back to Texas for another year, and he ended up declaring. That surprised a lot of people. So he would be a guy that I think that if you don't take a tackle day one, maybe that's an option for them on day early day two to go with a Cameron Williams. But either way, like I do think that there are options for them as they get into the first and second round.
Howie Roseman said something interesting when he talked to Eagles reporters last weekend, which I actually thought was a good way to think about it.
Okay.
And it was in reference to the Mekhi Becton signing. He said, if you exit a draft having filled all your needs, you probably had a bad draft.
Right. Yep.
And I think that's right.
Mm-hmm.
It goes to best player available,
yes.
and like it could be kismet that everything matches, and maybe you're moving around the draft board enough to make that the case. But I think it is more likely, as he has been through so many of these drafts, that there are going to be times when you're on the board and a player at not a position of need is standing out like a sore thumb, and you got to make that pick. And so I think that's a good way to think about it. But from if they could fill all their holes, some of the other positions that I think middle rounds they'd like to hit. I mean, tight end is an obvious one, right?
Which is a good year for that.
And I don't know what Dallas Goedert, his future is going to be in Philadelphia given the injuries after Nakobe Dean's injury, and who knows if Zach Bond returns. I think linebacker is certainly on that list. And then other than that, like the roster's in pretty good shape. Like I think they can afford to sort of take the best available.
And I also think that this is also a draft where I don't know that – look, I think you want as many picks as possible every single year.
Yeah.
And I do, but I think that this is a year like lean into that, where I think that because you're going to have some of these paydays coming down the road. When you look at Cam Jurgens is going to be getting paid.
Yeah.
Obviously, you just paid both receivers, but it's going to be getting to the point where some of these guys you're going to have to start, paying some of these young talent that you're leaning on right now, playing on rookie deals. Before we know it, like that payday's coming. So I think that you want to continue to try and lean into volume there in the draft, and this is a good year to do exactly that.
I think defensive tackle, if Milton Williams leaves, is interesting in middle round. Safety potentially, but I think the Eagles can afford to be position agnostic after filling a couple spots.
Yes, and look, they were so good on the pro side of things last year.
Yeah.
When you get a Mekhi Becton, you get a Zach Bond, being able to kind of fill those holes that way, bargain basement shopping. That if you feel like you have confidence in being able to do that again, Zach talked with Jeffrey Lurie said on Monday at opening night that hey, we expect to get comp picks next year. So I don't think it seems like they're going to be too active in free agency this year. The draft will be a big tool for them.
All right. Let's close this out. Hit me with some of the big quotes that you gathered over the past 2 weeks that you think are worth passing on to our loyal, beloved audience.
So, again, one thing I love doing is just talking with these players about teammates, about opponents, and I've got like a group of like 6 to 8 questions that I typically ask every year, and I fine-tune it over the course of time. But, one thing when I'm talking about for teammates, for guys that are blue-chip prospects, and to me, like one of the few blue-chip players in this class is Travis Hunter from Colorado, especially a guy that's as gifted as him, is – what's like the craziest thing you've seen this guy do?
Yeah, good.
What's the freakiest thing you've seen him do? And so guys will talk about plays they've made in games, and at that point we've all seen those plays, right? We've always seen those highlights. But I was talking with Colorado safety, Cam Silman Craig, who is like one of their leaders on defense, and one of their better players on that side of the ball, and he played with Shedeur Sanders and was coached by Dion in high school.
Okay.
Followed them to Jacksonville State and then to Colorado.
So he's seen it all.
He's seen it all. So he was there at Jacksonville State when Travis Hunter got there. He was the 5-star recruit, number 1 guy. So I said, what's the craziest thing? You've played in the secondary with this guy for 3 years. What's the craziest thing you've seen him do? He said, I'd never seen this. He said he came in as a freshman. It was his first spring. He said he probably had 5 one-on-ones his first day. He picked off 4 of them.
Oh, my God.
And he's dying laughing as he's telling me that. And I'm cracking up.
So funny.
He was like, I've never seen anything like it. And he came back the next day, and he did it again. And he was like, this is before, like, we knew, like, oh, he's going to play receiver, and he's going to do all that. Like, but he came in as a corner day 1 in one-on-ones and picked off 4 passes in one-on-one. And we were like, yeah, like, this guy's going to be, he's going to be a top pick. That one I very much enjoyed.
That's a good one.
The other one of my guys, I really like the South Carolina safety, Nick Emmanwori.
Yes.
And one of the things I don't like to lead guys down a path. I'll just ask like an open-ended question, like, hey, like who are some of the leaders on who would you say the leader of the defense is outside of yourself? Like who's the leader on defense? So I talked with the South Carolina defensive tackle Tonka Hemingway. It's like, hey, who's the leader on defense? And he said it was Nick Emmanwori. And I was like, all right, can you give me an example of like that leadership, of that work ethic, that stands out? And he said, look, he puts a lot into it. Sometimes I'd be in there late, and he would be out there late on the field at night, just working on catching on the jugs machine. Again, he's a safety. And he would just be on the jugs machine, just full on, just catching. He put so much into it. So all that he had, Emmanwori had a bunch of picks this year, and he had, I think it was like 3 pick sixes. So like he was literally, that was like a point of emphasis for him in the offseason, was to improve those hands. He said that production did not happen by accident. He'd be out there at night, late afternoon on a weekend, just working. It's like it's stuff like that. Where
Sounds
it's
like
that's
Sirianni type.
Yes, dude, like Emmanwori is really, really good.
That's your guy.
To me, like a top 20 player in this draft. So that was a good nugget. And the thing that I'm going through now is I talked with like 40 players at the Shrine. I didn't talk with anybody at the Senior Bowl because the Senior Bowl like player access has been bad. So I'll talk with probably like 80 guys, 100 guys at the Combine. It's going to be tough.
Okay.
But go through all the transcriptions. Get them all separated into quotes, and then I got to get them all in my sheet, and then I got to transfer from my sheet onto the database on allphly.com. So, all that to say, you will see all of these nuggets from all of these players. If you're a diehard, you go into the draft database, and all of these will be in there. So
now is the time to do it.
Yes,
$36 for the year.
And
that's $3 a month.
And you should know.
Are you a sicko or not?
That's exactly right. All of these weren't in press conferences. Like these are exclusive, like one-on-one conversations, and so you're literally not going to get these anywhere else. So the other ones that I wanted to share. Let's start you, Tyler Warren, the Penn State tight end, a fan favorite. I think Eagles fans probably just put to bed the idea that Tyler Warren's going to end up in Philadelphia. Daniel Jeremiah had him in the top 10 of his mock draft this year, or the last week. He's not making it to 31, 32. Like Tyler Warren's not going to be there. So I talked with his former teammate, Auburn wide receiver KeAndre Lambert-Smith, who was at Auburn last year. He was at Penn State before that. I said, like, did you expect? Obviously, you watched Penn State this year. Did you expect Tyler Warren to have the huge year that he had? And he said, absolutely. We called him Mr. Consistent. When I was there offensively, he came in every day with the same attitude, and all he did was work. He came in to a loaded tight end room. When he got there, it was Brenton Strange, who ended up being a second-round pick. Theo Johnson ended up being a fourth-round pick, and then it was Tyler. But Tyler was always the same guy, even with from his freshman year. He always showcased that ability. He would get him out there in wildcat snaps, in the whiteout game. That's their spring game. Scoring touchdowns, jumping over people, making contested catches. So again, getting like those anecdotes from players, like, oh, this is what this guy did early on in his career before he became a star. That stuff's gold for me. So I love hearing that. And then also, one thing I love to ask players too: who's the toughest player that you faced in a game this year?
Okay.
Not the most talented, or because a lot of times, like, oh yeah, like I played against Travis Hunter.
Yeah, sure.
It's like, but I want to like who's the guy where like matched your intensity, was really tough, really physical. So UCLA linebacker Kane Medrano told me that it was Tyler Warren. He said, obviously he had a big day against us from a pass game standpoint, but what he did as a blocker, he's a really good blocker, and he got after us from the jump, like, and spoke about the run blocking aspect of it. And again, like those kind of things really stand out for me. So that was a good nugget there from Medrano.
Okay, I like it.
Yeah, again, you see me like scrolling through here. I highlighted
it's a 15-page document that you have.
There's a lot of notes there.
It's untitled though. You're not gonna title that?
Well, no, because these are all going to go. This is just a dump. It's a holding area to go into. Yeah.
I'm all about holding areas on the Google Docs.
Yes.
No doubt about it. But I'm surprised that just in case, you must have other untitled documents. You don't want to just say quote dump or draft player quote dump and then you move it. I don't know. Don't let me tell you how to do your job.
Draft player
prospect quote dump. Yeah.
Prospect quote dump.
Yeah.
All right. Done.
Okay. I think we feel more comfortable now.
That's why I honestly
delete.
Now we'll put it to the test. But yeah, to me, like that is one of my favorite parts of this process, is being able to talk to these guys. And anyone that's been around me at the Combine, like the media standpoint, they know like that these are the questions I ask every single spring. Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl, and then out in Indianapolis.
Let's get real sick here. Who's someone from next year's class that you heard like rave reviews about?
Okay, one of my favorite anecdotes that I got. So I talked with Pitt's kicker.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm sure he was mobbed.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was a one-on-one. I said
what an exclusive.
But you know what I find though? Here's what's interesting. I love talking with specialists at these things because no one else is talking to them.
Sure.
And sometimes those guys are shy, whatever. Other times, if you get one that likes to talk, they will give you everything because no one else is talking to them.
Right.
So they will talk for like 20 minutes and just give you. Like I remember talking with Will Reichard, who was I think he was Alabama's there. He was Alabama's kicker, but I think he's with the Browns. Dude, I got so much stuff on Alabama's roster for the next 3 years from Will Reichard. So I'm talking to the Pitt kicker, and I was like, who is a guy, because they have some players on defense that I like, and they had a receiver at the Shrine Bowl that I liked. But I was like, who's a guy that you kind of felt their energy on the other side of the field? And he said Cade Klubnik. So Clemson at the end of it was basically like it was Pitt against Clemson, and Pitt takes the lead late. They go out and they score. Clemson comes on the field with 30 seconds left in the game. And the kicker from Pitt was like, look, like I had faith in our defense, but I looked across the field. It's 30 seconds left. They had like no timeouts. And I just see Klubnik there just like stone-faced, like locked in. And I was like, oh, crap. Like he looks like he's like ready to go. He leads them down. They score a field, or they score to win the game late. And he was like, I remember getting on the bus and thinking like, man, like I looked at Klubnik before that drive, and he was like ready to roll. That was probably my favorite one that I've gotten from like an opponent. But I talked with like Clemson's running back about Klubnik. He gave me some good stuff there. So the one question I've been asked in the last couple of years is if you could bet your first NFL paycheck on a freshman from this past draft class making it to the league in 3 years, who would it be? And so like what's always good is when there's a bunch of UCLA players or a bunch of Pitt players and you get the similar answers.
Yeah.
Love that. So there were a bunch of UCLA players at the Shrine Bowl, and everybody loved this receiver, Quasi Gilmore. Freak athlete. The way he reads coverages and understands the game of football was outstanding. The way he would route up our DBs in practice. Insane work ethic and drive. Practices full speed every play. So now, like if you're a diehard driver, they're like, that's going into the database, and in 2028, I'm going to be ready. We've got all these notes ready for.
Now you're not just getting the
Quasi Gilmore.
The value now. You're getting it down the road. It's an investment.
That's right. That's exactly right. It's one of my favorite parts of the process.
Fantastic stuff. Fran Duffy. That's why he's the best. We're done here at the Senior Bowl. Obviously, the PHLY Draft Podcast with Fran Duffy will continue throughout the draft season. We've got the Combine coming up in a couple of weeks. Fran's going to be there. He's going to be mining all those guys for information. You know where to find it. Right here and on allphly.com to become a diehard. For Fran, I'm Bo. We thank you for watching. We'll talk to you next week. Goodbye.
We all silly like the mayor.